It's Friday night. You're prowling the aisles of the neighborhood video store. You aren't sure what you're looking for yet, but you'll know it when you see it. And that's when the cover art slams into your vision. You slide the tape into your VCR and hit play. Before Chuck Norris throws a single punch, before Chuck Bronson fires a single bullet, a C and arrow shoot across the screen to form that legendary logo. You realize it immediately. This is gonna rule.
Delta 2, this is Delta 1, over.
Let this be our final battle!
Join me as I celebrate Cannon Films. An empire of cheap thrills and cheaper budgets. A story told through the one thing that was always there to greet viewers right before the insanity began. Welcome to another episode of Into the Logoverse. If you enjoy this content, please remember to hit the like button. If you haven't already, please also consider subscribing. Every click helps the channel grow. Thanks so much. The story of Cannon Films is the story of Meneham Golan and Yoram Globus, two brash Israeli cousins, one a tornado of creative energy, the other a shrewd money man. Together they set out to do nothing short than to take over Hollywood, and for one glorious moment in the 1980s, they almost did. But Cannon's story doesn't actually begin with those bombastic cousins, who would later be nicknamed the Go-Go Boys. Instead, it begins in 1967 with two other men, Dennis Friedland and Chris Dewey. Young and determined, they formed the Cannon Group as a shoestring operation, their films costing no more than $300,000 each. The company found early success importing and rebranding softcore European movies for American audiences. Cannon also scored a significant critical win in 1970 with the politically charged Joe, starring Peter Boyle.
You hate him as much as I do.
These early days of Cannon feel like a prototype of what was to follow. Even then, the formula was taking shape. Cheap, fast, provocative. The famous hexagon is also present, although not quite as splashy as it would eventually become. Against a stark black background, the symbol appears built out of a stylized C and arrow locked together. The C turns blue, the arrow purple, and the hexagon then shrinks smoothly to the left. It splits apart to leave behind the company name. In a final move, the C snaps back to the arrow, wiping the text away. Although sometimes silent, this first version did have a musical theme, titled Fanfare for an Ambassador by Charles Williams. A series of flops in the 1970s, coupled with changing tax laws, pushed Cannon to the brink of ruin. Meneham Golan, along with his cousin Yoram Globus, purchased the struggling Cannon Group in 1979 for the bargain basement price of $500,000. A larger-than-life filmmaker, Golan had already directed a film for Cannon, the commercially successful hijacking thriller Operation Thunderbolt in 1977. Raised on a steady diet of American spectacle, the cousins set out to stake their claim in Hollywood. What Friedland and Dewey had started, Golan and Globus would now supercharge. Their timing couldn't have been better, thanks to two beautiful words: home video. VHS tapes were nothing short of a revolution, giving movie fans access to a vast library of films and the ability to watch them in the comfort of their living rooms. Suddenly, movies could have a lucrative second life beyond a theatrical release. To their credit, Cannon realized this faster than practically anyone. They adopted a shotgun approach to filmmaking. Buy up scripts nobody else wanted, keep the budgets tight, and get the movies onto video store shelves as fast as possible. Combined with their shrewd ability to pre-sell films to foreign markets, Cannon often found themselves profiting before cameras had even captured a single frame. With Golan and Globus now running the show, Cannon switched to a different version of the logo in 1980, a shockingly understated incarnation. Yes, the iconic hexagon remains, but it's been reduced in size. Also absent are any flashy animations or synth fanfare. It's a simple static image, oddly uncanon-like in its restraint. By the early 1980s, the slasher boom was in full swing following the success of Halloween and Friday the 13th. Cannon dove in with films like Schizoid, New Year's Evil, and Hospital Massacre. At the same time, Cannon helped kick off an entirely different craze. Enter the Ninja starred Italian actor Franco Nero as an unlikely ninja. Meneham Golan himself directed the movie, which introduced American audiences to those mysterious assassins. Pop culture fell in love with ninjas, and the genre became something of a signature brand for Cannon. But nothing announced Cannon's ambitions more loudly than Death Wish 2. Released by Paramount in 1974, the original Death Wish starred Charles Bronson as Paul Kersey, a New York architect driven to vigilantism after a horrific attack on his family. Gritty and controversial, Death Wish struck a nerve with audiences, earning a tidy profit in the process. Golan and Globus saw the potential for a sequel. Just one problem: they didn't have the rights. True to form, that minor detail did not stop them. The cousins announced Death Wish 2 before fully securing the rights, prompting Dino De Laurentiis, one of the producers of the original, to threaten a lawsuit. Golan and Globus managed to strike a deal, even luring Bronson back to the lead role with a script that cranked up the carnage. Critics were horrified. Moviegoers were thrilled. Charles Bronson was pushing 60 when he starred in Death Wish 2. His clout with the major studios had faded, but he found a second life with Cannon, headlining a series of violent and outrageous films for the company, including sequels Death Wish 3 and Death Wish 4, The Crackdown. More often than not, the cousins simply created their own version of a pre-existing film. Take Missing in Action. Many have noted the glaring similarities to Rambo: First Blood Part 2, although Missing in Action reached theaters well before the Rambo sequel. However, Golan and Globus had come across an early treatment of First Blood Part 2 in 1983, written by a then up-and-coming James Cameron. Inspired, they quickly produced their own riff on the concept, filming two POW revenge fantasies back-to-back. With the almighty Chuck Norris starring as Colonel James Braddock, Missing in Action became a surprise hit. If you couldn't beat him, copy the hell out of him. Chuck Norris made 10 movies with Cannon. In many ways, he was the bearded face of the brand. Back to that hexagon. The third emblem debuted in 1984 and gets us much closer to the classic Cannon logo we all remember. The C and arrow shoot into frame from opposite sides, both now colored blue. They then lock together to form the multi-lined hexagon. The company name appears below, and a moment later, light shimmers across the hexagon, followed by a sudden burst of illumination, giving the geometric symbol a white glow. The hexagon then dramatically zooms away, shrinking from view with a final star-like gleam. "1985 saw Canon unveil their fourth logo, the version most audiences now associate with the Scrappy Movie Company. Like earlier iterations, the familiar C and arrow rocket onto the screen from opposite sides, but now they're rendered in polished metal, giving the logo a sleeker, harder edge. They snap together with authority, forming that unmistakable hexagon. Below it, the word Canon fades into view. The hexagon itself gives off a radiant shimmer before the text vanishes. The individual segments of the hexagon then peel off and fly toward us one by one. A dramatic fanfare sets the tone. This logo arrived just as Canon was reaching the height of its power and productivity. In 1986, they scored their biggest financial success ever with the wonderfully unhinged Cobra, starring Sylvester Stallone. This time, Canon spent big, at least by their standards. Critics tore the movie apart, but it's since become a cult classic, a rite of passage for many of Canon's films. For a brief moment, Golan and Globus seemed unstoppable, building a transcontinental empire of low-budget hits. But behind the scenes, the company was collapsing. In 1985, Canon set its sights high with Tobe Hooper's Life Force, a big-budget science fiction spectacle meant to rival Hollywood blockbusters. Despite a wild concept, nude space vampires invading London, the film flopped. Hooper's remake of Invaders from Mars in 1986 also failed to turn a profit. Following their success with Cobra, Canon shelled out $12 million to Stallone, a massive payday for his starring role as the gloriously named Lincoln Hawk in the arm wrestling drama Over the Top. An obvious attempt to replicate the success of Rocky, Over the Top was yet another box office bomb. Canon could produce B-movie gold on a tight budget, but when they tried to play in the big leagues, their resources and instincts were usually outmatched. Nowhere was that more evident than in Masters of the Universe. This live-action adaptation of the Mattel toy line was supposed to be Canon's answer to Star Wars, or so they claimed. A loud and disjointed mess, Masters of the Universe suffered from having to spend much of its runtime confined to Earth. But for all its many faults, Masters of the Universe has found an appreciative cult following. Back in 1987, though, audiences stayed away. Perhaps the biggest misstep of all came with Superman 4: The Quest for Peace. The company was overextended, suffering from excessive expansion, numerous lawsuits, and financial mismanagement. In other words, they were out of cash. Superman 4 fatally damaged Canon's brand. The era of flashy trade ads and sky-high promises was ending. The partnership between Meneham Golan and Yoram Globus fractured. Golan left to run 21st Century Film Corporation, a company that would also stumble before dissolving. Canon itself was eventually sold. In the end, Canon left behind a legacy of contradictions. Yes, there was ninja mayhem, evil terrorists, and even some breakdancing. But there were also genuine artistic triumphs. The bleak thriller Runaway Train scored Oscar nominations for Jon Voight and Eric Roberts, while the Shakespearean opera Othello won many critical accolades. Reckless and trailblazing, the company often promised more than it could deliver. But Canon dreamed big, worked fast, and man did they swing for the fences. Today the films live on not just as memes or nostalgia, but in a growing appreciation for the company's unique contributions to cinema. For better or worse, nobody made movies quite like Cannon. I'm Michael Cahill. Thanks so much for watching. Until next time.
I'm gonna hit you with so many rights, you're gonna beg for a left.